In my early 40s, I finally reached the point of no return with my narcissistic mother. I had spent decades trying to navigate her web of manipulation, control, and emotional abuse. However, as I began to understand my codependency and started my journey to heal from the trauma she had inflicted on me throughout my life, I decided it was time to confront her toxic behavior. Throughout my 30s, I had often taken a more hands-off approach in dealing with my mother. It was a survival tactic that seemed to work for a while. But as I gained insight into the dynamics of our relationship, I became more assertive and began to call her out on her manipulative behavior. I was patient. I stood my ground. I refused to back down, and sometimes I found a certain satisfaction in outwitting her in her own game. I played along with her schemes, all the while keeping a firm grip on my own emotions. But as time went on, these interactions began to take a toll on my mental well-being. I realized that engaging with her was costing me my peace of mind, and I had to contemplate the idea of going no contact. Then came the incident with an old tea kettle that pushed me over the edge. Here's the backstory. I had moved back to my hometown to take care of my ailing grandmother. It was a challenging decision that meant leaving behind my established career for a lower-paying job. But I had made a promise to my grandmother to care for her in her final years, and I was determined to keep that promise. Living with my grandmother also meant living in a house that my mother would eventually inherit. I knew that dealing with my mother, a covert narcissist, would not be easy, but I had to put my grandmother's well-being first. For 4 years, I dedicated myself to her care, paying for everything and doing all the upkeep in the house. When my grandmother passed away, my mother, who had already swooped in, began imposing her rules and conditions. She expected me to stay in the house and pay her rent while making renovations and repairs. I had done all the work, and I wasn't about to hand her money, so I made plans to move. Despite my mother's desperate attempts to prevent me from leaving, I stood my ground and eventually relocated, leaving behind the house and her control. I tried to maintain a relationship with her after I left, but it didn't take long for me to realize that the toxic patterns were still present. She manipulated, belittled, and gaslit me at every opportunity. In a family group chat, she used a trivial incident involving an old tea kettle as a weapon against me. She accused me of giving the kettle, a family heirloom, to my father, her ex-husband. The problem was that I had no recollection of ever giving the kettle to my father. I insisted that I had not taken it from the house, but she wouldn't believe me. The tea kettle became the epicenter of a storm of lies and manipulation. My mother insisted I was the culprit and that I had to return it to her immediately. I called my father to get to the bottom of the kettle situation, and he informed me that my grandmother had actually given it to him during her lifetime, as she thought it rightfully belonged to him. But the kettle had become a tool for my mother to accuse me of wrongdoing. As I went back and forth with her about this insignificant item, it became clear that her lies were driving me to the brink. She was relentless in her pursuit of control, and I had had enough. I stopped engaging with her, making the difficult but necessary decision to go no contact. The fallout was intense. My mother launched a campaign to discredit me, turning friends and family against me, with her distorted version of events. But I had a plan. I had been documenting her lies and manipulations over the years, recording conversations and saving text messages to maintain my sanity. When she persisted in her efforts to tarnish my name, I released the evidence to the people in her life. I created a group chat that included my contacts, family, friends, former friends, and even the preacher who had attempted to shame me. I shared the recordings, text messages, and other proof of her deceit. As the truth unfolded, my father, who had also suffered from her lies and manipulation, took a picture of the tea kettle and asked everyone, "Was this really worth it?" The revelation of her lies had a profound impact on the people involved, causing a rift in her web of deceit. Some apologized to me, and others sided with her, but I knew that I had done what was necessary to break free from her control. I cut off many of those relationships, not out of resentment, but because I no longer missed those who had believed her lies. In the end, I took a stand for my own well-being. I had spent years trying to be the good daughter, but when I finally broke free, I broke hard. I made the decision to go no contact that day and stood by my choice. Despite the turmoil that followed, I had, for the first time in my life, taken control and started the journey to healing from the scars my narcissistic mother had inflicted on me for far too long.
In the rugged mountains of West Virginia, a chilling tale unfolds. Meet a cantankerous, elderly aunt, known far and wide for her mean and bitter disposition. Rumors of her involvement in a mysterious death have circulated for years, yet justice has always eluded her. Nestled in this remote, forested valley, she lived next to a reclusive family who valued their solitude. Trouble began when she introduced chickens to her property, letting them roam freely. Unfenced and undisciplined, they frequently trespassed onto the neighbors' land, catching the eye of their dogs. One fateful day, tensions escalated. Without warning, she mercilessly gunned down the neighbor's dogs for harming one of her cherished chickens. What was a deadly overreaction on her property turned into a bloodbath in the neighbor's front yard. Threatening them with her shotgun, she declared that if another chicken-killing dog appeared, it would meet the same fate. The neighbors, with their small children and love for the dogs, seethed with anger but dared not involve the law. They understood her violent reputation and the futility of seeking justice. Her threats and aggressive behavior only fueled their resentment. A couple of weeks later, while she was away in town, retribution struck. Her home's back window shattered, and a Molotov cocktail, a lethal concoction of burning oil and gas, was hurled inside. By the time the fire department arrived, her house was reduced to ashes. All her possessions, her entire life, incinerated in a fiery reckoning. The neighbors claimed innocence, and the sheriff's department found no evidence to link them to the fire. Suspicion hung heavy in the mountain air, but my aunt, with a long list of adversaries, had always managed to slip through the grasp of the law. Left homeless and desolate, she was forced to retreat from her mountain domain, and her son eventually procured a shabby trailer in town. The moral of this spine-tingling story is clear: never underestimate the bond between a mountain man and his loyal dogs, for retribution in these isolated, unforgiving lands can be swift and merciless. As a child in a quaint village, I witnessed a brazen act that would trigger a series of consequences for a local businessman. The heart of our village was the historic Victorian School, a Grade II listed building that had served various purposes over the years. When a local business owner took it upon himself to demolish the school without seeking proper consent, it sparked a chain of events that would leave him entangled in a web of legal woes. The initial slap on the wrist came in the form of a substantial fine from the council for his unauthorized demolition. However, this proved to be just the beginning of his troubles. Fast forward to the present day, and I found myself auditing the planning office's records. There, I uncovered a fascinating tale of the businessman's relentless pursuit to build on the now vacant plot of land. Over the past 4 decades, he had submitted no less than 11 planning applications, all of which had been denied. What's more, a note from the past highlighted his first offense, complete with reminders to planners that no building was to be permitted on that land for the next 99 years. The files revealed a series of legal actions taken against him, each one ending in failure. There was even a provision stating that if the land were to change ownership, all future applications would meet the same fate, denial. But the story doesn't end there. A recent request by the owner to address safety concerns and clean up the site, which had become a health hazard, brought more trouble. The council's warning was crystal clear: comply or face fines. In a twist of irony, the very same businessman had faced another challenge when building houses in the same borough. Council planners compelled him to move the footings of all 12 houses because they deviated from the agreed-upon positions. The cost of this adjustment ran into thousands. The moral of this tale is clear: while people's memories may fade, local government's institutional memory remains intact. The businessman's audacious actions had consequences that persisted for decades, a testament to the enduring power of regulation and oversight.
After the chaos of World War II, thousands of soldiers returned home, yearning for a fresh start away from the hustle and bustle of the city. The post-war era saw a housing boom, with developers racing to build homes to meet the demand. However, some developers resorted to unscrupulous practices, including construction on land that hadn't been formally acquired. Enter G, a pilot who returned home to a transformed town in 1948. The place he remembered as tired and worn down had been revitalized with new roads, a traffic light, and endless housing developments. But what struck him the most was the construction on his childhood friend John's cherished family tree farm. The puzzle deepened at a welcome home dinner when G's great-grandmother alluded to John not being alive to witness the changes. However, G knew better. He had received a postcard from John in Hawaii just days before. It turned out that John's parents had passed away in his absence, leaving the family farm unprotected. The unscrupulous developer seized the opportunity, and more than 20 homes were being built on the land. G was determined to deliver the shocking news to John and immediately sent a telegraph to Hawaii. There was no response, leaving G speculating that the news had sent John into shock. The Navy veteran returned home within days, furious and ready for action. Bursting into the mayor's office, he created a commotion that left everyone aghast. When John sought legal recourse in the neighboring town, a 7-year court battle ensued. The corrupt mayor was sentenced to 8 years in jail, and the developer faced bankruptcy. It was revealed that the mayor had allowed construction on John's dead family farm for personal gain. John's lawsuit also left pre-sold homes unfinished, leading to more legal woes for the developer. In the end, the mayor, developer, and the town had to pay John a substantial sum, equivalent to over $752,000 today. The farm was returned to its original state, making John an incredibly satisfied man. Today, John's tree farm has been transformed into a nature reserve, while the corrupt mayor's tale remains a local legend, passed down by the few who remember it. John passed away in 1999, but his legacy and the story of his triumphant fight live on. During my first year at a university in the scenic west of England, I found myself in a mammoth Georgian student house, home to 23 male under- and postgrads. With multiple kitchens at our disposal, the inevitable food pilfering had become a frustratingly common occurrence. Fed up with the audacity of these culinary bandits, I decided to take matters into my own hands, inspired by a recent discussion about adding laxatives to coffee creamer in response to theft, though I'd like to clarify, that's not a legal or recommended approach. Around that time, in my microbiology class, we were experimenting with an orthopoxvirus, a less severe relative of cowpox, which was deemed safe for first-year students, provided we wore masks, gloves, and protective eyewear. It was in this context that I witnessed a fellow student's mishap. One of my lab partners struggled with sterile technique while handling the virus, inadvertently developing a blister on her lips, likely due to the creation of an inadvertent aerosol. With this incident fresh in my mind, I decided to take a tiny sample of the virus and discreetly introduce it to a block of cheese. A few days later, my thieving housemates exhibited suspicious blister-like sores around their mouths. This peculiar ailment kept them indoors and away from mischief. Although they harbored suspicions about the source, I took careful measures not to cross-contaminate while preparing cheese on toast, ensuring that I remained untouched, the heat from cooking effectively neutralizes the virus. After this incident, my food remained untouched, and the thieves seemed to have learned their lesson. Looking back, I can't help but acknowledge the risky nature of my culinary vengeance.